In preparation for this symposium, I reread the articles that I had read both before, and I was struck by the way Jay concludes his article, as you guys might recall. I'm going to read it. To be truly radical is to be rationally radical. We follow Nagarjuna and Chandrakirti as guides down the chariot path of rational inquiry to the city of liberation. Huntington we leave to wander, bereft of reason, aimless and alone in the trackless wilderness of samsara. The joke's not finished. Acknowledgements. Thanks to Sonam Takche, Mario D'Amato, and John Powers for helpful comments on previous drafts. I just want to say that I assure you, any error in that statement, I totally disavow. It's entirely Jay's. Had nothing to do with that, Mark, whatsoever.
I read it as a curse.
I read it, it's interesting because this will kind of lead us into the one point that I have for the whole symposium. That is that when I first read it again, I was struck by like, wow, that seemed kind of harsh speech-ish. Maybe a little strong and makes Jay look so good and Sandy so bad. Okay, second moment of the dialectic. Wait a second. Jay sounds like one of these kind of monkish eggheads who believes that he's going off into the city of reason, whereas Sandy seemed more like one of these Nakpa tantrikas with the bun and like, you don't know if the guy's crazy, is he drunk, what, but maybe he's closer to it. Maybe he's a Mahasiddha, bereft of reason. So that kind of led me then to think further about what's at stake here and what are we here to try to discuss. And as many of the previous speakers already pointed out, I think the real issue at stake is what Sandy himself pointed out, which is, are there arguments here in these Madhyamaka texts? Or is it simply the appearance of arguments? Right? Is there really some sort of subscribing to this idea that reason is something unitary, that we could actually articulate arguments that are probative and that would lead to these true conclusions? Furthermore, are there theses? And then there's the whole issue of pratigna or drishti, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it's in a way, it could kind of lead us to this point. And here was my approach. I was trying to see, because I've heard various other commentators before me try to see, is it the case that Jay's right, or maybe Sandy's right, or maybe there's a middle way. I think we're going too much to this middle way thing. We always want to knee-jerk middle way it in the study of Buddhism, don't we? Because that's kind of like the real high ground, George, not just the altitude-wise high ground. It's sometimes perceived in the popular imagination that if I can out-middle way somebody, that's the deal right there. Okay, but I'm thinking maybe go Hegel. Let's go Aufhebung on this. So here's what I thought. Might it be the case that the point at issue is something that can't really be resolved in the terms that are laid out? Might it be the case that there isn't really a middle way between these, but that you really have to sublate the two positions, right? And so I'm thinking of it in terms of the Hegelian dialectic. So the first moment, you might think of as Sandy's because that was the first paper, but that's not right because Sandy's is actually a response. The first moment of the dialectic here is Jay's view, which is to say that reason is upheld, arguments are presented, there are theses, maybe it's a kind of anti-foundationalism, a la Jan and Dan Arnold. So that's the first moment of the dialectic. There are theses, there are arguments, etc. The second moment of the dialectic, no, there aren't, right? That arguments aren't really upheld. It's just a technique, an upaya. These are terms that, for example, Sandy mentions in the article. It's just trying to get you to achieve a certain kind of experience, So whether it works or not is what matters, not whether it's actually logically probative. Is it a valid argument? All that is irrelevant. There are no theses because I'm not trying to get you anywhere. I'm just trying to get you to let go of theses. So that's the second moment of the dialectic. In other words, the negation of the first moment. So the properly Hegelian dialectic is, what's the negation of the negation? So how do we get to the third moment? And here's what I came up with. People keep using Jacques Derrida. They keep, well, not meaning to, but they're saying deconstruction. Where do we get that word? You could say Heidegger, but really we got it from Jacques Derrida. Okay, Jacques Derrida says, if you want to convince a native speaker of speaking, that you're speaking Chinese, there's only one way to do it, to speak Chinese. So what if you want to convince someone who is using reason that there are limits to reason? You have to use reason. So I think that's a way to kind of understand the movement here, and it's a way that brings these two positions together. Because in a sense, Jay is saying that he bows to reason in the beginning, the middle, the end, because he's looking at the limits here. And what other method is there than to use reason? Whereas Sandy is kind of occupying, like in one of Jay's fancy pants diagrams that he does with Graham, right, that you referred to earlier, Sandy is kind of that place outside of that egg-shaped thing, whatever that egg is, with the line that goes from the middle of the egg to the edge of the egg, which we know what it is, but it sounds funnier that way. Sandy's talking from outside of the egg. And what are you really going to say when you're outside of that egg of reason? You're going to sound that you're as if you're bereft of reason, as if you're aimless and alone in the trackless wilderness of samsara. So I'm thinking that maybe the only possible resolution to the debate in these two thinkers is to sort of see them as both talking about something very similar, but that really what you're trying to get at is to move beyond language and concepts. You're really trying to get to this nirvikalpa jnana, non-conceptual awareness. So how am I going to convince you that's using language and concepts to get to non-conceptual awareness, or even convince you that it's a possibility? Only through language and concepts, right? So then it's a matter of, are you staying within it or going outside of it? That's basically my point. If I have another minute, I'll just say one or two more things. I'm thinking the way to go with all this is fictionalism, right? I've said this before, and I'm probably going to say it again for the rest of my career, I don't know. That if we kind of read this all in terms of fictionalism, I think it also gives us a way to bring these two positions together. Because from the perspective of fictionalism, then what you would see is that the arguments themselves have to be valid, even if they're fictional, right? They have to be valid within the parameters set by that fiction. But they're a fiction. So in that sense, are they really the ultimate? I mean, even the ultimate, even from the perspective of the ultimate, even Jay would agree that nothing's to be said, right? I'll leave it at that, because this way we could open it up a little bit.